Hi there. It is time to up pot something that I started just a few weeks ago that are not really, well, they're nothing that I would eat, but they are a great help for your vegetable garden. And so let me show you what we're working with today. So these are marigolds, and I've got 3 or 4 different varieties, but they're all the kind that stay small. So they're all a type of a French marigold, so they won't get huge, real tall. I mean, it will get to a fairly good sized plant in the garden, so you do have to think about that when you put it in your garden. But it's not like some marigolds that are, forget if it's not, they're not French, it's the other kind. They actually can get to be like a perennial size, fairly tall. So those are not something generally that you want to mix in with your vegetables in your vegetable garden, whereas these you can tuck here and there throughout the garden, and it's a really good idea to do so. It's a form of like a natural way to help manage and prevent pests from going after the plants that you are trying to grow to have things that you can eat, and not maybe wanting to put a lot of chemicals to keep them from being devoured by predatory insects. So this is one type of plant that I like to plant here and there in my garden. So French marigolds. The varieties that we have this year are Gypsy Sunshine. So I think that was a very sunny yellow color. Little Hero Fire has some bits of like a reddish tone to it. Tangerine, I think those were kind of what they sound like. They've got a little orangish flavor to them. Bambino, I think, was kind of a mix of some orangish tones, maybe some red, but then also some yellow. Most marigolds have some yellow in them in some sort. And then this was Strawberry Blonde, and has a little bit more of a pink tint in there. And then these are the other things that I like to put in or near my vegetable garden, and they are nasturtiums. Now, supposedly you can eat nasturtiums. They, like, the greenery, it's like a spicier flavor, people have said, but I'm not a real fan of stuff like that, so I don't eat them, but some people do. And the leaves will get much bigger. So again, these are something that you want to be careful and thoughtful about where you're putting. They also get very kind of viney. So I like to try to tuck things like, or try to tuck these plants right along the outside edge or the very front of like pretending this is my garden bed. I would tuck it here in like corners or along the edge where I've got the fencing, and then I try to get it to kind of climb up the fencing as opposed to spilling into the garden bed, because I really don't want to use up usable space for growing things for the most part in my garden with these, although they're very important and helpful. I want every square inch possible to go to things like tomato plants and pepper plants and onions and things that I'm going to eat. But these help keep those plants healthy and keep a lot of insects away that we don't want. And at the same time, they will flower and help draw in pollinators, which help make the tomatoes and the peppers and the things in the garden. So the varieties of nasturtium that I have this year are peach melba, cherry rose, and tip-top rose and tip-top salmon. So kind of like some pinks and a little bit of orangey colors, peach colors in there to kind of mix in. And then this is something that I don't know that it necessarily is going to help as far as any pest management, but it just is a really cute little annual flower called Gomphrena. And I have 3 different colors. And these are some plants that I am going to put probably in some pots right at the entrance to my vegetable gardens. And they will help attract lots of pollinators, so in that sense they help the vegetable garden, but I don't know if they necessarily do anything as far as drawing away, either repelling or drawing insects to them. So there's 2 ways that plants can help your garden in that sense. You can have what are called trap crops, and I think marigolds do trap, in a sense, certain things. They draw things to them that you don't want on your vegetable plants. And then they also help repel. So those are the 2 ways that plants like this can help your vegetable garden. They can either repel things that you don't want, because of the scent of them is unattractive to the insects that you don't want, or they can attract to themselves plants that you don't want on your vegetable plants, and so therefore your vegetable plants are being left alone because this is more attractive to certain things. So, and I don't know for sure which things attract which insects. That would be something to Google. I just remember that these are really mentioned in lots and lots of places as the marigolds and the nasturtiums are great things to add to your garden that are not necessarily things you're going to eat, but they help your garden be super productive and healthy. A couple of other things that you can use, alyssum is good, and it's kind of like a little ground cover. Also, basil is really good to mix in with your tomato plants, and I will use that in recipes. But the other thing that basil can do is it can help keep the hornworms away from your tomato plants. So I tend to put basil, I just either grow some from seed and then plant it around the base of my tomato plants, or I will put seeds down. When I plant my tomato plants, I'll put some basil seeds mixed around underneath, and then they just kind of grow up underneath the shade of the tomato plants, and they help things along. So anyways, that was a lot of explaining. Let's get into what we're doing. Basically, we're going to pot these up into slightly bigger spaces because it is the very end of April, and these are going to go out in the garden fairly soon. We just want to get past any danger of frost. So I'm just going to move them up into slightly bigger trays than what they're in now. So right now they're in these little mini kind of like 6-packs that 12 of these fit into a tray like this called a 10-20 tray because it's approximately 10 inches by 20 inches. So 12 of these fit in here, 6 of these fit in there. So they're going to be moved up into a space that is twice as large, which means, if you know math, the volume is about 4 times as much. So they've going to have a lot more room to develop some roots, and that is plenty of extra space for the time that we have left until they're going to go out in the garden. So we do this just like we pot up anything. We're going to basically pop them out of here, which, by the way, these trays are really nice for that. They have these holes on the bottom, so you can kind of stick your finger up in there and push them, which is nice because they're a little stiffer plastic, so they'll last longer, but that also means they're not very squishable. All right, so then you just pull them out. We've got some nice healthy roots. They're nice and white, but they're not completely pot bound. The roots are still growing down, but they were starting to come out the bottom a little bit, so I'm just going to loosen that part up a little bit. And then in here, I've got some potting mix already moistened up so that it's not dry, and that's something you definitely want to do. You do not want super dry potting mix that you're potting up into and thinking you're going to then water it, because a lot of potting mix has a lot of sphagnum peat moss or cocoa coir that it's made out of, and that stuff tends to be a little hydrophobic when it's super dry. So we just put a little potting mix in here to start with. I made a space, and then I'm going to put this in, kind of tuck it down a little bit, and then I will add about the mower. It's time to mow. Got my nephew out there taking care of that. Anyways, I'll try to speed this up. So then we just add in a little more potting mix around so that there's no air pockets, and then we tuck it in and rinse and repeat until we're all done. So there we go. That's all there is to it. Potting up is the same for pretty much anything that you pot up. Most things you do the same way. You take them out of the small container, you put them in the bigger container, you make sure that there's no air pockets, that you've got it completely filled in with potting mix. I usually leave a little bit of space at the top so that when I water, the water doesn't run off, and especially because I'm watering indoors, my house, and that's it. So thanks for joining me here today in Aunt Susan's garden.